Hi, SFLogicNinja here, and welcome to the dojo. We're going to be talking about the EXS24 today, which I'm sure all of you have been dying to see. The EXS24 is not the most powerful sampler on the market, but it is one of the most efficient and easiest to use within the environment of Logic. Today we're going to be talking about how to organize your files and where all of your EXS24 instruments and samples are located. We'll be talking about doing synthesis on the front panel of the EXS24, and then we'll be getting our hands dirty in the editor. Along with that, there are several workflows that take place in the environment window, and we're going to be exploring those as well. So sit back, don't relax, because this is going to be hard. No, I'm just kidding, it's going to be easy. Let's get into it. I'm here to take you into the depths of the EXS24. Now, I have this session set up now. It's just basically a blank template, and I've put a software instrument on my first track. I'm going to go over here to the input of that software instrument, and I'm going to choose the EXS24 sampler. And here we are. Now, the EXS24 sampler, I'm not going to say that it's the best sampler. I'm not going to say that it's the most powerful sampler, but it breaks down to this. It's extremely efficient, it's very well integrated into Logic, and it's extremely flexible. And in this tutorial, I want to show you all of the possibilities that you can get out of the EXS24. Now, I've talked a little bit about the EXS24 before, but this time we're really going to get in depth and cover all of the bases of the EXS24 in all of its glory. So the first stage that I want to take us through is where the assets of the EXS24 are, because the EXS24 has a lot of resources that it pulls from, and we need to know where they live on the hard drive. So I'm going to Command Tab over to my Finder and create a new window, and I'm going to go to my hard drive. And there are two main libraries where the EXS24 is going to store its resources. The first one is going to be in the library under Application Support, Logic, Sampler Instruments. Now, these are the sampler instruments that the EXS24 sees. The EXS24 basically has two types of resources that it uses. There's the instrument, where it has all of the settings that are on the front side or the panel side of the EXS24. And then there are the samples that are being used by the EXS24. These are the instruments. This is basically, they're organized into folders, and these are the system-based sounds that you get with the EXS24. Now, when I say system-based, I mean that any user of the computer are going to have access to these resources. So these that came with this particular install of Logic, I have acoustic pianos and basses and drums and percussion, keyboards, synthesizers. Now, these are all specifically for the EXS24. If I open up the acoustic pianos folder, I'll see that we get this kind of file. If I do a get info on it real quick, this symbol right here is the symbol for the EXS24 instrument. These are the overall panel settings for the EXS24. Okay? Now I'm going to go back a tick, and you'll see that there are EXS factory samples. Now, these are the actual sounds that were recorded using a microphone to put in the EXS24. So if I open that folder up, you'll see that there is a similar hierarchy of folders, and within these folders, I have all of the individual samples. Now, I can actually listen to each of these samples with quick. So using Quick Look, I'm actually playing the individual piano notes that are being used by this particular instrument in the EXS24. So those are the system-based resources for the EXS24. Again, I'm going to go to column view so that we can really see this. Library, Application Support, Logic, EXS Factory Samples, and here are the factory samples. I can also go to the Sampler Instruments folder. These are the front panel settings and the editor settings for the EXS24. Okay, so those are system-based. That means that anybody who uses your computer is going to have access to them. Well, you may make your own instruments and say, well, you know, I'm sharing a studio with a friend of mine, and he doesn't need access to all of my instruments, so I'm going to save my own instruments. Anytime you create your own custom-made instrument in the EXS24, it gets stored to your user folder. So I'm going to go to User, Home, Library, Application Support, come down to Logic, and then there is a Sampler Instruments folder, and there should be an EXS Samples folder, but I don't see one here. I wonder why that is. Oh, another thing too is this Sampler Instruments folder isn't actually a folder, it's an alias. Now later on I'm going to show you how you can take your library, your complete EXS24 library, and store it on an external drive, but still be able to see it within Logic. So in this case, I have an alias that goes to an external drive that sees all of my custom settings. So, you know, if I'm sharing my studio with somebody, which I usually don't, but if I do, they won't have access to these instruments because I would have to have my external drive mounted to the system. I'm kind of sneaky like that. Anywho, so that's where the sampler instruments, and if I happen to store my EXS samples into this same directory, they would be here as well. Okay, so those are where you will find the EXS24 instruments and the samples. Now, like I said, you can create an alias of your sampler instruments folder, and then that way you can store those instruments on an external drive. The way that you create an alias folder, for instance, let's say my key commands, if I right click on it, there's something in this list here that says make alias. And what you do is you make the alias, and the alias stays on the computer, but the original folder would live on another drive. And when you plug that drive in, the system will automatically look through and find that and use those resources. Okay? So that's where the resources for the EXS24 live. All right? Now, I'm going to go back to Logic. So here's our EXS24. To get access to the library of sounds that you get with the EXS24, you can either click right here where these three little dashes are, and that shows you not only your system-based sounds, it also shows you your own personal sounds that you've created. Or I can also go to my Media tab, go to Library, and there's my EXS24 settings. Now it's very important to get this library. You have to make sure that the EXS24 is in focus. That means that you mouse over it, you click once on the EXS24, and there's this barely perceptible little white area around the EXS24 that tells you that it's in focus. Okay? Now that's important because if I went up here and double click in this EQ area, that instantiates an EQ, right? And if I click on that EQ, see, it's got that barely perceptible line around the channel EQ. Well, that's going to give me a library for the channel EQ, okay? So if I choose drums and I go to my drum EQ settings over here, I will be kind of disappointed if I expect that to actually be a sampler instrument.